We're also muted.
So normally that will just, when it's actually the blue light on, then there's
Then
more
it just turns up
voices,
there.
and then we just need to hit go live and make sure we're muted before.
Yeah. But you don't have to worry too much about being muted. In this case, I just waited for them to be out of frame. That's working, so I'm going to turn my phone off.
Okay, great. So just grab a mat and we'll try and make a nice tidy arrangement, lining up. Great. Get what you need to be comfortable for the evening.
We need a little clock. We need a clock.
That's the clock.
Yeah. That's it.
Good. Yes, so welcome from me. This is Dharma Night. I'm on the Dharma Night team. My name is Subhadramati, and it's my great pleasure to have Subhadramati and Vishvantara joining us tonight. There's lots I could say about them, each of them individually. I want to say a few things about them. Mainly I want to say, I think the reason that they're here is because of their friendship, so what we've got tonight is two friends talking about their passions, which are poetry and the Dharma. Let's see how that unfolds. And I just found out that they met in 1987. So that is a really long-standing and solid friendship. And it's a friendship based in the Dharma. So they met on their first introduction to Buddhism meditation course. A bit like the one that's running next door. So they were both on the same course, and then look at them now. 37 years later, here they are. It's not the first time they've done things together, and I happen to know that once they did was it an all-night or a 12-hour poetry reading, and they're planning another one. So they both got a friendship based on Buddhism. And Buddhist practice, and also poetry. They both write poems. Vishvantara wrote a beautiful poem about their friendship. I remember that to celebrate Subhadramati. So their lives are very, very entwined. They both teach here, or have taught here, over the years. Subhadramati used to be one of the main teachers here on Monday nights. So if you've been coming for a while, you'll know that. And now she teaches elsewhere at Women's Ordination Training Retreat Centre. And Vishvantara lives around the corner and writes poetry and plays music and does all sorts of things. So I'm going to hand over to them. They're going to, what's it called? A takeover. They're going to do a takeover, Dharma night takeover. They're going to lead the class this evening. So we're really happy that you're doing that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much, Kusasara. Thanks for inviting us in the first place, and I thank you to all of you for having us, as it were. And yeah, really hello to anybody that's watching online, now or later, as it were. So maybe shall I say a little bit about the format of the class? So we're going to be talking for a bit, then we're going to meditate for a bit, and then we're going to have a cup of tea together. And then we're going to come back and do some more talking and some more meditating. And there'll be a chance for you to talk to each other as well, finishing about 9:30, 9:35, something like that. And yes, as Kusasara says, we're going to be talking hopefully about the Dharma and also about poetry. And not just poetry in general, but we're going to be talking about the poetry of Bhante Sangharakshita. So Sangharakshita, as you may know, is the founder of Triratna, which this Buddhist Centre is part of. And for those of us in the order, he's our teacher. And we say Bhante, and it means revered teacher, and Sangharakshita is his Buddhist name. So before we just launch into that, we thought, well, maybe it's a good idea to say, well, why would we do such a thing in the first place? And we thought it was interesting for us thinking back all those 37 years ago. I mean, I remember it so vividly, actually. It was an outreach of the centre here in Covent Garden, a 6-week course. And I remember the course, I remember Dhammarati, our teacher, and I remember you, Vishvantara, on that course. We all had to go around and introduce ourselves, as you do. And I really remember you from that day. And it looks like you do too. So thinking back to that time, where we both somehow found ourselves learning to meditate. So at that time, Vishvantara, did you think you needed a Buddhist teacher?
I certainly didn't, and I decided I wanted to meditate. I thought it might help me de-stress, I thought it might help me get happier, and I saw a poster on the tube for meditation, and I looked in a magazine called City Limits, which is like Time Out, found a number, rang it, it said meditation 6-week course. I thought that's exactly what I want. I rang the number, and whoever answered the phone must have said London Buddhist Centre, and I didn't hear it. I just said, "Oh, is that meditation?" I don't know what I meant by that, but I certainly wasn't looking for Buddhism, and I wanted to learn to meditate. So when I came along, I was so taken and impressed and moved and stirred and energized by both the meditation practices that we learned, especially the Metta Bhavana, and by the teacher Dhammarati, and there was a certain something that was behind this meditation that I wanted to find out more. So it started from curiosity and interest, but I certainly wasn't looking for a teacher. And if anybody had said to me, this is one of the most important nights of your life and you must change your life and all that, I would have just gone. But it was just a very gradual process.
Yeah, now that's interesting, isn't it? It's only in retrospect one sees, oh, that was an important night of my life. I mean, I too certainly wasn't looking for a teacher, capital T, or even a teacher, small t, although I did find in Dhammarati quite instantly, I thought, oh gosh, I think I'd like to be more like him. Just the intelligence, the emotional intelligence, awareness, the simple fact he remembered my name from one week to the next. And I particularly remember when he said, with my name, which he'd remembered, he said, "How are you?" I thought, oh, he actually means that. I felt like it was the first person in my life that said, "How are you?" and actually really deeply wanted to know the answer. But yeah, like you, I certainly wasn't looking for teacher capital T. So what would you say now about like Bhante, teacher with capital
Yes,
T?
well, I think that I have derived personally so much from the spiritual life that from the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, the three refuges that Buddhism celebrates, and I've gained so much that the person who founded the movement is become a central figure for me, and has been from the beginning, because when we came along, Bhante Sangharakshita was living at the London Buddhist Centre, and I did meet him. But I think that it's said, and it's a wonderful phrase, that the Dharma is caught, not taught. And so to me, having a teacher is about a teacher both in the sense of a spiritual friend more experienced, and in the sense of Bhante Sangharakshita, who founded the movement and to whom I'm so grateful, is that one can catch the Dharma from one's teachers in a way that if you just read a book or are given course materials to read, it's not the same thing as meeting people who are actually living the life and practicing what's being taught.
Yeah. Now that's really good, isn't it? And when we were talking, I know you really like this notion of, the metaphor of perfume, that everything we do here, whether we know about Bhante Sangharakshita or not, in a sense, actually, because he is the founder, it's all perfumed by his particular approach, his emphasis on things like spiritual friendship and poetry, for example, which you might not find in other Buddhist movements or traditions. So even if somebody didn't know anything about Bhante, in a sense we're still partaking of, to mix the metaphor slightly, partaking of that perfume. But then that's interesting. So we didn't think we needed a teacher, but now we've come to value that. But here we're doing something even more specific, as we're going to read the poetry of that teacher. So why do that? Like, here's the book of poetry. It's quite thick. We have actually read this cover to cover, Vishvantara and I, and Vishvantara's actually written the preface to this book. But here we've got this whole weighty book of poetry. It's published in this book, but as far as I know, it's never been published elsewhere. It's not like he's a famous poet who's been published. So why read his poetry, Vishvantara?
Well, I think somebody who can set up who can practice Buddhism, tear up their passport in their 20s, go for refuge, put on a robe, beg their food. This is what happened initially. Somebody with that kind of passion for the Dharma, for them to set up a movement which is now spread all over the world and lasts after their death. Because often with spiritual movements and movements of different kinds, after the founder has gone, often that it's hard for them to keep going. But our movement seems to be flourishing and more people getting involved. And it's because of the Dharma, of course, but it's also because of the way it has been practiced and presented to us. And as an interpreter of the Dharma, I feel Bhante was a spiritual genius. And some of that genius, he's not a genius poet perhaps, and not known elsewhere other than in our movement, but as a spiritual practitioner, there was that element of spark. There was that spark of genius that then has meant that the movement has flourished and grown to the extent it has. It's only 50 years old, but nearly 50 years old. But no, it's more than that.
A little bit more. Yeah.
Sorry, yes.
Just
my
over
maths
50.
isn't very good.
Yeah.
Thank you. But yeah, so the poetry. In fact, Sangharakshita himself said, if you want to get to know me, read my poems. Because they are like a spiritual diary, if you like, of so many moods, aren't they? And actual dharmic teachings as well. And his passion for for the Bodhisattva ideal. Some of you may have come across that term. Yes.
Yeah, well, in a way that preempted my next question to you, which was, because I thought that's, your passion for like this teacher whose movement survived his own death. But, you could say, well, he's also written loads of prose. There's a whole bookshop full of books by Bhante. We could read them,
Yes.
We can read about different sutras and different teachings and different phases of Buddhism. But again, why read the poems in particular? But I think you've gone halfway to answer that. But just say a little bit more.
The passion.
Okay.
I think the passion comes across in the poems.
Oh.
The prose is brilliant and wonderful to read and deeply felt and deeply thought through and envisioned and very, very, very learned as well. But the poems have that passionate spontaneity. They arise from a moment in the life, and they're the crystallization of something in that life, the outpouring, an out-breath, and an out-breath of an experience, if you like, or a mood. And as such, they have that sort of living quality, very, very sort of vivid. They're very vivid, I feel. And especially our first poem, I think that's...
Yeah, it has.
really
Well, I was
comes
just
across.
thinking that just before we go on to the
Yeah.
first poem, I just want to say one more thing about how we're going to structure the evening, because we were, thinking about this evening for quite a while and thinking of, well, we want to draw out certain themes, and we had lots of different ideas. But in the end, what we thought was, given that the evening is in two parts, we thought we'd theme it in two parts. So part one is going to be, well, that aspect of the Dharma life, actually any spiritual life, whether you were a Buddhist or following any tradition, where you're looking at, well, how am I going to transform myself in line with my values? So that's going to be the whole first half. But the second half's going to be, well, that's all very well, but what about other people? What about the rest of the world? What about my relationships? Surely it can't just all be about me. Yeah, so that's what the second half's going to look at in the poems. But yeah, let's read the first poem. So Vishvantara's going to read this.
So, the first poem is called I Want to Break Out. I want to break out, batter down the door, go tramping black heather all day on the windy moor, and at night, in hayloft or under hedge, find a companion suited to my mind. I want to break through, shatter time and space, cut up the void with a knife, pitch the stars from their place, nor shrink back when, lidded with darkness, the eye of reality opens and blinds me, blue as the sky.
Right, thank you. Beautifully read. And I know this is one of your favourites, and again, this was another debate about which poem will we start with, and I really wanted us to start with this because I thought, well, I don't know, but I thought this might, if you haven't heard Bhante's poem, possibly surprise you, because if you think of poems written by, a meditating Buddhist, you might think they're going to be rather quiet, and rather, I don't know, they might have titles like My Shrine at Night or something like that. They might be kind of... Whereas, you've got this like force, in some ways you might think, is it even very Buddhistic to have this, I want to break down and batter things and smash things and so on. I don't know, was anybody a bit surprised to hear that kind of thing from a Buddhist poet? I think I was at first. So why do you love this poem so much, Vishvantara?
I think I love its energy, its just like you're saying, its spiritual energy. And I love the final image in each stanza. It's in two tiny little verses. The last line of the first verse is, find a companion suited to my mind. which is such a longing, isn't it? Probably for everyone can identify with that actually what we want is to communicate our deepest selves, our deepest values, to take life seriously, to talk about these things. And I feel that this is saying what a lot of us will resonate with. And then the second stanza, the second verse, I want to break out of sort of society, rules, regulations, and find this companion where we can speak the truth. And then I want to break through, and then this is, I think, talking about in Dharmic terms, break through the delusions that we live with and in and from, and really see how things really are, which in Buddhism is a practice that we aspire to and undertake and study how to do that, and cut up the void with a knife is just like playing, this Buddhist word lila, to play with the truth. And then the final image, the eye of reality opens and blinds me. What an image for seeing, is actually to be blinded by the truth. It's so paradoxical, isn't it? Blue as the sky. So there we have just a few thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're very, very good thoughts, and I think it's interesting to go into it a bit more as well, isn't it? Slightly backtracking, but just these like talking about breaking, cutting, and so on. I think that's a very, very strong. It's a very, very strong theme of Bhante's throughout. In that Buddhism isn't about quietude. It isn't about. Yes, we meditate and we try and calm the mind, but Bhante was very, very wary, especially around about this time in his life. This was written, when was it? 1967. So, just to set the scene. So by this time, Bhante he was born in England. He'd been drafted to India by some amazing fortuitous chance in the war as a signal operator. That's where he tore up his passport in India and went wandering and was ordained as a monk and so on. But now when he's written this poem, he's come back to Britain, initially just for a visit, and then he stayed. And he found that the Buddhism did exist, but in what he thought was rather a stuffy sort of way, and rather, like my images were people going to Buddhist talks, but all sitting on chairs and all just being quite cerebral and heady about it. And Bhante had a horror of that. I think that's not too strong a word. He said, that's not what Buddhism's about. It has to be lived. And also it's not about cutting off your emotions and becoming very sort of mindful, but from the neck up, He actually thought that was dangerous. So he's challenging something, isn't he? He is being playful, but
very serious.
Yeah, very
serious.
Very serious at the same time. Yeah. I like that. One of my favourite things I think I read it in a seminar of Bhante's. He's talking about ethics in the seminar, and he says there's some people. He said you can't exactly fault their ethics, but there's something rather dead about them. So there's nothing dead about that poem. So Buddhism isn't about being quiet, mindful and good in a narrow sense. It's about being wild and having all your energies available. And also you need that. If you're going to have full transformation, you need that all there. Yeah. Could you just say a little bit more about that last image again, about the reality blinding?
Yes.
It's quite mysterious.
It is mysterious, nor shrink back when lidded with darkness, the eye of reality opens. So I think the darkness is interesting, that the eye is covered by, this is another image from Buddhist teaching, is the coverings that cover the truth, and we can't see through them. So the eye is lidded with darkness, the eye of reality opens and blinds me.
You love that,
I
don't you?
love
Why
I think it's because light, the light of the truth is so bright that it can almost hurt our sort of normal eyes. When we really see something, do you ever have that experience that sometimes when you see something for the first time, really truthfully, it can almost hurt a bit because, actually, ouch, yes, I see, I was wrong before and now I've got it. And it can be a bit painful, just that transition between not seeing and seeing. So I think it's a sort of giant version of that experience. I don't know if that's...
Yeah, no, it's wonderful because it's always been quite a mysterious last pair of lines to me. Yeah.
And blue as the sky is a very expansive, limitless. The blue sky it can be an image for infinite space, infinite possibility.
Good. Okay, shall we have the next one?
Yes.
Great. So, this is from a similar period of Bante's life. So again, he's now more established. So a few years later, he's more established back in England. He's already, but what's the huge change that's happened is he's now started what will become the Triratna Buddhist movement and order. In those days, it was called the Western Buddhist Order and the Friends of the Western Buddhist Order. That's a hugely audacious thing he's done, to start a new movement. But that's what he's done. A few people have been ordained. It's the year's 1969 of this poem. Also, the poem's not about this, but for some reason I wanted to give this as reference. He's just had a huge event in his personal life, which his closest friend has just died by suicide. So he had one friend, which probably is the friend referred to in the previous poem, that friend suited to my mind, Terry, has died. Yeah? And that's been a huge, I don't know quite even how to describe it.
Well, he said he cried every day
for 6 months.
After.
Interesting enough, he never stopped teaching the Dharma. He talks about that. I find this very, very moving. He it's almost like he takes it for granted that he would just keep teaching. In his diary, he said when I was teaching, he says, Terry's died when I was teaching the class that night. I felt the grief, but he felt the grief while teaching. Most of us, it's an either or. I think, gosh, if it'd be like if you died and I was like teaching the class that night. I don't think I've got a big enough being to do that. But Bante he would have felt that grief to his core, but he didn't stop teaching the Dharma, even for one single day. Anyway, this poem isn't about that, but somehow I just wanted to give that as the reference of that's what's just happened. So this poem is called Fourth Metamorphosis. Too long have I been a camel, ship of the desert. Too long knelt to be laden with other men's merchandise. Too long have I been a lion, lord of the jungle. Too long fought paper and tinsel dragons. Too long have I been a child, parent of the future. Now it is time to be myself. Okay, so we picked this poem. It clearly works with our theme of becoming, more and more of, in Bante's own terms, a true individual, capital T, capital I. It's not succumbing to other men's merchandise. It's not fighting these paper and tinsel dragons. this mysterious thing about being a child parent of the future. Now it's time to be myself. So I was very drawn to this poem, and then I had to confess to Vishvantara, I was thinking, what actually does it mean? Like, so you've got these 4 verses, 4 changes, 4 metamorphoses. What do you think it means? As too long have I been a camel, ship of the desert?
Well, it's interesting because Sangharakshita by this time, as you say, has founded the movement and stands as in relationship of teacher to people. And I wonder whether perhaps the images are all of ways of relating. So you can sort of kneel down and have expectations heaped on you, as it were, from other people, other men's merchandise. So you take those on, or perhaps, or you stand like a lion roaring and sort of making yourself a sort of strong and heard, and so you can be in that sort of relationship.
And what about these paper and tinsel dragons?
Well, they're obviously not very frightening. So maybe it's, I don't know what that's to do with. Maybe just getting down to what's really important somehow, and not sort of fighting battles that you shouldn't really be fighting. I don't know. I don't know what that means. But it all seems very unattractive, doesn't it? To be the camel and to be the lion and to be fighting the tinsel dragons. It all seems very unrewarding somehow.
And then what about this, too long have I been a child parent of the future? That's mysterious, isn't it?
That's mysterious. Child parent. Yes. I mean, it seems that that the myself is not parent of the future, doesn't it? It's contrasting with that. So.
It's interesting to look at this on the, I don't know if people can see on the page, because each verse is smaller and smaller. So the first one's got 4 quite long lines and 4 shorter lines, then just 2 little lines, and then then the last verse is, now it's time to be then just myself on a single line. It's just the shape of that seems quite important, doesn't it? These things are getting simpler and simpler.
Yes.
I'm not going to be someone for anyone else, and I imagine that's a not uncommon theme. We find ourselves living our lives. You can be in relation in the right way and in relation in the wrong way, isn't there? We'll come on in the second half to the right way to be in relation, but there's definitely a wrong way to be in relation, to be trying to, what's the wrong way? It's trying to act, according to expectations, according to maybe one's own expectations. We internalise them, don't they? Very, very interesting. The practice of being on solitary retreat. I don't know, has anyone ever tried that yet? Being on solitary retreat yet? A few of you can put your hand up if you've been on solitary retreat. So it's quite a recommended common practice we do in Triratna. I was talking to another friend, my Triratna, this morning, who's just been on a month solitary retreat. And he and I, we noticed we had the very same experience. So there you are on solitary retreat, and you find yourself, see if this resonates with other people, doing this thing, which is you're saying to yourself, oh, I've been really bad, I haven't meditated long enough. Oh, I've been really bad, I got up too late. Does anyone recognise that? So do you see how that's a bit like being this camel, who's putting that burden on us? It's like nobody, but it's very, very common to feel that even when you're on your own, and you've got to just tell yourself, look, nobody's telling me when I have to get up, and in fact, who even cares, or is ever going to care in their whole life? How many hours of meditation Subhadramati did in that hut in Scotland one winter in like 1992 or something, It doesn't But strangely, it seemed at the time, it feels like you're trying to live up to these expectations that you don't even know where they came from. Does that, I don't know, does that, I can see a few people nodding. So I think that's what Bante's talking about, breaking free of.
Yeah.
There's the expectations of other people actually, but also those ones we internalise. We think, I've got to be this kind of person because blah, blah, blah. And actually I just realised that that's exactly what has happened, because Bante, at this time, was not living up to the expectations of British Buddhists at that time. He was an ordained monk, but he dared to let his hair grow a few inches longer than was supposed to be. He started like doing things that would have been considered outrageous, like, you know, going to the theatre, going to pubs and drinking a pint of Guinness and so on. That would have been absolutely outrageous in the English Sangha at that time. And that, in the end, was why he ended up starting a new movement. He got one of those letters, a sort of Dear John letter, you know, that was like, how was it couched? How was it said? You can see a copy of it if you ever go to a retreat centre at Adhisthana. It was something like, it was like, what am I trying to put this? It was the equivalent of, if you go into that room, you'll find a pistol. Not like literally, but if you decide to retire, that'll be the honourable thing to do. And Bante, of course, didn't honourably decide to retire. He said, I want to start a new Buddhist movement. You know, because he'd done these outrageous things, and his friendship with Terry, which was suspected of being gay, which strangely enough wasn't. Even if it had been, what's the big deal? But what, you know, it wasn't even, but that would have been outrageous, you know, for someone at the time. So he was not living up to expectations, you know. So yeah, it's interesting that poem comes in. I feel like I realised something more about it myself.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about the confidence to say, if I'm a child, I'm parent of the future. I'm worried about that future, so I'm gonna try and anticipate the future. I'm gonna try and act to get what I want to happen in the future. But that's a child's attitude. And to be myself, I have confidence in my ethics. If I'm practicing ethics, then it's the abhaya mudra. It's if my ethics are pure, the future is taken care of. I don't have to worry about the future. So that kind of confidence is grown up. In ethical terms.
That's very good. Well, good. Well, okay, so we've now got our last one of this first half, which is again a much later one. Oops, let me find it for you. You've got your little system here. Oh, here we are, much later in the book.
It's 1995.
1995. So by this time, Bante was 70 years old.
70,
Yeah.
yes. This one's called 3 Plumes, and it's very short. I understand the blind old king who rode into battle at the head of his troops, a knight on either side to guide him. He did not wait for death, but went bravely to meet him. The 3 white plumes on his helmet danced in the sunlight.
Let me read that one again, because it's short.
3 Plumes. I understand the blind old king who rode into battle at the head of his troops, a knight on either side to guide him. He did not wait for death, but went bravely to meet him. The 3 white plumes on his helmet danced in the sunlight.
Very, very striking, isn't it? Just that going to meet, the thing that we regard as most fearful, not waiting, but just going towards it. And then that beautiful image of the dancing plumes, the dancing feathers. Did you have any other thoughts about that one?
Well, to be writing that age 70,
Yeah.
I feel is to do with the sort of relationship with death, with one's own death, coming into relationship with one's mortality. He says, I understand the blind old king. And so the faculties, the sense faculties are waning. He's blind. So he has to have guides on either side to ride into battle. And when you're riding towards death and you can't even see what's coming at you, it must be even more frightening, I would imagine. To me it would be. But Sangharakshita says, I understand he's going to meet death bravely, and he's not waiting for it. So it's like the battle is often a metaphor for our journey in life, isn't it? We can think of it as a battle of forces. There's so many ways to think of journey and spiritual journey, but that's one metaphor. And not to wait for death. I suppose we all have experience of there's a poem by Philip Larkin about a rabbit who's ill, and it says, if I just keep still and wait long enough, it should get better. And we, the reader, knows it won't. But it's that sort of waiting. I'll just wait. I'll just wait a bit longer and hope for the best. And it's that sort of complete opposite to that. It's like going to meet the forces one is reckoning with and dealing with them. I think
it is. Yeah, and it's quite a new poem, that one, to me, because it's in this collected works, but not in his early ones, and it really reminded me of some of our rituals in Triratna, particularly the ritual of becoming ordained, because what we often say about becoming ordained is one of the things that makes you ready to be ordained is the willingness to stand alone. And that even if no one else in the world was going to take this step, you would still take it. And it's actually enacted in the ordination ceremony. So when you have your ordination ceremony, and all of us who've been ordained have done this, and everybody who's aspiring to be ordained will do this, you walk to the place where you'll be ordained, and you make that walk alone. And you don't know exactly where you're going. You are guided there, but you walk alone. And an image that's often used is you're walking into the tiger's cave. There's footsteps going in, but none coming out. So it's something about, it just reminded me of that, just that importance of we've got to be prepared, as we do in our literal death, to do something alone. No one can go with you to literal death, but we prepare for that by taking these individual steps. Yeah. Good. So we're going to have a little 10-minute meditation now before tea. So maybe would be able to just dim the lights, and would I be able to just grab the bell maybe? Thank you. So let's just settle. Great. So let's meditate for 10 minutes. So just settling. Noticing perhaps if any of those images from the poems have stayed in your mind, or the words, and just let them reverberate if they're there, or if they're not, that's fine as well. just spend this time just following our breath. So it's like the third stage of the mindfulness of breathing. So we're going to have a cup of tea now, and we'll be coming back in about 20, just over 20 minutes, 20, 25 minutes. Is that right? Is that right? Yeah. Yeah, just for the people online as well. So
20 minutes.
Yeah, good to see you after tea. Yeah. Good, so welcome back everyone, and welcome you new people have arrived, so that's really nice, and welcome back online as well. So we're going to carry on with this theme in the second half of Bantu's poetry. But we're going to just, before we go on to our sort of new section, we're just going to continue our first section a little bit more. So that first section, you could say, was all about how do we really become ourselves? How do we even know what being ourselves even is? And especially in that last poem called The Three Plumes, we had this amazing image of the blind old king, like going towards death, like not shying away from the most frightening thing, but going bravely towards it. So the first thing we're going to do in this half is, in a minute, I'm going to invite you to get into little groups of 3 to talk about, well, your own experience of that. Like, when have you faced up to something frightening? It could be a big thing, it could be quite a small thing, like sometimes even, I don't know, having a difficult conversation is frightening or something like that. So does everybody think they can think of a time where they've like faced into something that's a bit frightening rather than back away from it? Good, few nods. Good, so this is a chance to, just for 5 or 6 minutes in little groups of 3, just talk about that, what it was, but what it was like, and sort of what the effect of that was. And if you're at home online, you can just have a little reflection on that. Maybe you could even write a little bit about it if you want. So why don't you go into groups of 3 now? And maybe the team can roughly try and split themselves up. So gather into little huddles of 3, and I'll tell you after 5 or 6 minutes. So do you want to go 3?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
and for a long time I used to be someone who was very avoidant. But then on the other end of the spectrum, there was rage where I pulled up to certain things. And I think learning how to not fulfill it. I feel like a lot of people money just to put it up. And I think learning how to do it because I'm too much on one end. Sometimes I explain something, people not taking it seriously, and then it becomes very dismissive. I think that's very hard.
I was ashamed to cut you off in full flood, but nice to come back into the big group again as well. Well, good. I'm glad that stimulated some conversation. That sounded very lively, actually. Actually, I was thinking, following on from what Akasha Mitra was saying about friendship, is what I really enjoy about coming to the Buddhist Centre is like we're given permission to talk about things that actually matter to us. I mean, we could do that all the time, but somehow, it's good to just sort of be allowed, as it were, to do that. So we won't have time to hear from everyone, sadly, but it'd be nice to maybe hear from just 2 or 3 people. Well, what if they would be willing to share, like of a time where they faced into something frightening, and I'm particularly interested in what the effect of that was. Yes, thank you.
I'd just like to say that from my experience myself, I was a lifetime carer from the age of 4.5 to 68 to what I am now.
Uh-huh.
And what was very lovely about in the end was that the fact that I met a friend. I was just saying to this colleague here, I met a friend that actually became my friend, and she was 30 years younger than me, but became soulmates, and we started off as friends, and then I became an uncle, then I became a granddad, and now she sees me as a dad, because none of her family will actually don't want to know her. Okay. So I support her like she supported me in my course, because I was caring for my mother. for 35 years full time.
Okay.
So I had 2 nervous breakdowns through that, you see, and even now I still can't get over certain things, you know, things do come back. But with this friend, it just shows you that if you find someone who's a soulmate and is a friend, just a friend, it's amazing what you can do for another person to help them as well as they can help you through very turbulent times in their life.
Thank you. That's a beautiful story, and thank you for sharing it, and really a testimony to the power of friendship. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And what about, has anybody got anything to share about a time when there was something frightening or difficult and they sort of rode towards it, as it were, on their horse? Yes.
It's an odd one, because it was fear of my inner self, really, having to face my own, having to face the fact that I was afraid and I was hiding from my own fear. And I'd say that the most difficult part, most challenging part was me recognizing that the fear was coming from a lack of willpower. Fear coming from, sometimes we want to say no to people, but it's a half-hearted no. Or sometimes we say, yes, I'm going to do something, but then people sabotage. And it's recognizing that because my yes is weak, other people don't respect it. Because my no is weak, other people push past it. And facing that, most of the time, there's times when I feel afraid because my willpower needs, that part of me needs to be strengthened. And I think there's a part of us where we become angry, or I had to face my own anger, that I was lashing out because I didn't want to admit my weakness. And having to face the part, or having to admit that I was weak, having to admit that I needed help. I think that was I think as a young man, that was very fearful, because it meant making myself vulnerable and having to strip off this armour that I was conditioned to wear.
That's very, very good, isn't it? I think you really said something very, very important, that we can think of things, when we think of things we're frightened of, we can think of external, but actually the most brave thing can be to look within often and actually face ourselves. And I really noticed that you said, just I think to learn was the ability to ask for help. Interesting enough, Bhante, he coins this term, the true individual, sort of capital T, capital I, as it were, who's somebody that's not always looking to just fall in what other people think we should say or do and so on. And anyway, one of the marks of a true individual is somebody who can ask for help, which is quite unusual, because we can often think that's a sign of weakness, but actually it's a sign of strength in that definition. But yeah, thank you very much for highlighting that the thing that we can often be facing is, I think, within ourselves. Yeah, and meditation really, well, that's what meditation is about. So meditation can be such a courageous thing, actually. Yeah. Another example? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, another example, and quick public announcement too, but going off from asking for help. So I was diagnosed with like ADHD, and I never asked adjustment or any help for it. But like recently, I finally asked my company for like adjustment and stuff, and you know, it was such a relief to be able to like openly talk about it and get all these supports. There's like a lot of support that a lot of companies have, so I really recommend you to, you know, I know it's scary, but to talk and ask for help. It was just terrifying because I think culturally Japan is quite, you know, is kind of workaholic, and also like not good at, you know, in general, it's just difficult to be open up about these.
It is, isn't it? So again, that's brilliant, like really well done to you. And what I would like to ask a follow-up question, so if you don't mind, so thank you so much for sharing that and making, as you say, a public announcement. So you asked for help. It sounds like one effect of that was your company did respond. What can you say, what was the effect on you of sort of, was there an inner effect on you? What was that?
Yes. so much, I think, like, first of all, so much more energy, because kind of feigning it, or kind of suppressing or faking it, or not being honest, it takes so much energy to maintain that. So that, also, just more like accepting, of my own condition. Like, for the longest time, even before asking for condition, I was kind of like denying, or like I thought I could treat the ADHD like myself. And being able to like actually talk about it to other people, and being open of it, that's real acceptance. But you can't really be open, transparent, and talk about it. You're not. There's most of the case, I think there's part of you that's kind of like not accepting. So like being like talking about it, actually I was able to like accept my condition more, and actually taking like guides and like tips and like from videos, and incorporating it to my life. That's there's a lot.
There's a lot. So it sounds like, well, just I'm really responding to the amount of energy released and the amount of effort it takes to hide something, even hide it from ourselves and hide it from other people. And then when we're ready and we take that step of being open, huge amount of energy. It's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? We think, I don't know what we think. We think we'll come with, we don't realise until it's only in retrospect we realise how much energy is caught up in like keeping the lid on something. So that's an amazing example. Thank you. Maybe one more before we move on, if anybody's got anything to share.
I was talking about having a conversation with quite a difficult conversation with someone, and it was obvious that between me and this person something wasn't quite working. And we lived together, so the conversation had to happen, and I was really quite fearful, and quite wouldn't necessarily have wanted to do that. But then there was quite a lot of courage on both sides in the conversation that we had. And I was talking about how liberating that felt, basically, like a weight had been lifted.
So why was it liberating? Can you just...
Because it felt like there was something that was not, that we both knew, we could see that something was happening, but we weren't talking about it or naming it. And then it felt like we explored something and both came to some sort of clarity around it. And there was a lot of kindness from both sides in that. So it felt like it was simultaneously liberating and connecting at the same time.
That's very, very good. And what gave you the impetus to do it? Because you could have just gone on sort of just pretending it was all right.
I suppose partly the context
Yeah.
that we're in is that we do try and communicate, well, we're aspiring to communicate openly. So it becomes a bit farcical if you've two Buddhists living together that aren't doing that.
Which is quite good. In a way, it's a sort of almost positive pressure, isn't it, to do it when we're actually, whether you are ordained and, as I am, when we've committed ourselves to telling the truth, and in a way you've got to live up to that, or as you say, it becomes farcical. And you don't, but you kind of think, I wish I could just have a day off. But you actually can't. But in a way it's good that you can.
Yeah,
it
sounds like that. You think, I wish I was just a normal person. We could just go to the pub, get drunk and complain about them.
You
can't do that.
You sort of do and you don't you? But actually it's much more, and it sounds like having had the courage to do it, there was fruits that you hadn't expected, actually it gives you more than you could have imagined. It makes you imagine you're closer with that person now than you were to begin with, in a way. That's very good. Okay, good. So this whole initial part of the evening's been really exploring that sort of inner work of how we're trying to grow as people, grow as, in Bante's own terms, true individuals. But of course, there's got to be more than that, because we are relational beings, and it can't just be about, like, you know, coming to the Buddhist Center on a Monday night and sort of meditating and then, not caring about the rest of the world. We have to take that into account. And actually, very lovely talk in the tea break, didn't we? We were talking in the tea break, and hope you don't mind me saying, like you were saying, your New Year's resolution was to come to the Buddhist Center, really rejoice in the benefits of your life and contribute, wasn't it? And contribute. So this second half is about, well, that aspect of the Buddhist life that's about contributing, that's about the fact that we actually, not that we have to become relational beings, we are in relationship, but it's making that relationship helpful, positive, and of benefit, and really to the nth degree, as Buddha's trying to do it to the nth degree. So we're going to read a longer poem now. It's actually a much earlier poem of Bante's, written in 1953, when Bante would have been still in his 20s, still in India. And actually that comes through, the context comes through, because it's responding to some of the things he would have encountered in India. And it's called the Bodhisattva's Reply. So just to say, a Bodhisattva, well, it literally means Bodhi, being. Sattva means being. Bodhi means like Buddha, awakened one. But more specifically, a Bodhisattva is someone who's explicitly practicing not just for their own sake, but for the sake of all that lives. So this is called the Bodhisattva's Reply, this poem, and Vishvantara is going to read it.
The Bodhisattva's Reply. What will you say to those whose lives spring up between custom and circumstance as weeds between wet stones? Whose lives corruptly flower, warped from the beautiful, refuse and sediment their means of sustenance? What will you say to them? That woman, night after night, must sell her body for bread. This boy, with the well-oiled hair and the innocence dead in his face, must lubricate the obscene bodies of gross old men. And both must be merry all day, for thinking would make them mad. What will you say to them? Those dull-eyed men must tend machines till they become machines, or till they are cogs in the giant wheel of industry, producing the clothes that they cannot wear and the cellophaned luxury goods they can never hope to buy. What will you say to them? Or these dim shadows, which through the pale gold tropic dawn from the outcast village flit, balancing on their heads baskets to bear away garbage and excrement, hugging the wall for fear of the scorn of their fellow men. What will you say to them? And wasted lives that litter the streets of modern cities, souls like butt ends tossed in the gutter and trampled on, human refuse dumped at the crossroads where civilization and civilization meet to breed the unbeautiful. What will you say to them? I shall say nothing, but only fold in compassion's arms their frailty, till it becomes strong with my strength, their limbs bright with my beauty, their souls with my wisdom luminous, or till I have become like them, a seed between wet stones of custom and circumstance.
Thank you. Thank you. Very beautiful poem, and quite a different sort of feel to this poem than the previous one. So, so you've got 6 very strong verses. So, the first 5, this question again and again, which is like it's a question to the Bodhisattva, but also it's a question that we might ask ourselves, like, what can I do? It's really a question. So what can I do about these terrible situations? And they're described one after one. Bhante wrote this poem, you can read in his memoirs, on meeting an individual, a young man in India, who was part of what's now called the Dalit community, which would have then been called the untouchable community, who would have had to hug the walls for fear, who were thought that even their shadow was polluting, and had to do these humiliating jobs, not just awful jobs, but jobs actually designed to humiliate, like carrying baskets of excrement on their head. And then, all the other people who are doing jobs that they don't want to do. I think that's the key thing. They don't want to do them, but they can't. There's no way out, And again, these are questions to the Bodhisattva, but there's questions to ourselves that I'm sure we've asked. What can we do in this sort of terrible world? So they're the sort of 5 great questions. And then you've got this quite extraordinary last verse, which takes it. Maybe we'll discuss this on to another level, because you can see, you could read it as a sort of social protest poem, but it's more than that by the last verse. So I wonder, could you just read us the first bit of the last verse again?
What will you say to them? I shall say nothing, but only fold in compassion's arms their frailty, till it becomes strong with my strength.
Okay, and the next little bit.
Their limbs bright with my beauty, their souls with my wisdom luminous.
Okay, so what do you make of that I shall say nothing, but fold in my arms?
Well, to me, it's a statement that the Bodhisattva identifies with the person who's suffering, to the extent that the Bodhisattva doesn't feel they need or want to or can preach anything. The fact of the suffering is the overwhelming experience, and the Bodhisattva is saying, I'm not going to talk to them, I'm not going to tell them the Four Noble Truths, I'm not going to teach them something or try to alleviate the suffering through words. I shall fold in compassion's arms their frailty. So the Bodhisattva is going to hug them, and in other words, something practical. And also a hug is exchanged between 2 equals, isn't it? It's an equal. We're equally human. And I have, it says, strong with my strength. I have the strength to hug the suffering person. So it's a practical and loving answer rather than a sort of, I'm up here, I'm going to teach you something. I think that's
it. And I think it's very, very interesting, because I think more and more, we talk often about compassion in Buddhism, but it can be a problematic word because it can slip into something that it's not. Let's see. Our common response to suffering can be either we can get what Buddhism calls horrified anxiety, and that like we shy away, we can't bear it, we get a bit freaked out by it, you know. So obviously that's not compassion, but just like you said, what you're describing really is something like pity, where we think we're being compassionate, but we're a bit like, oh look, I'm this wonderful good person, like doling something, you know, giving something out to you poor lowly person. And the Buddhist word that I like most for compassion the word is anukampa, and it literally means to tremble with. And I think that what you've described, it gives that, it's like to feel it as oneself. It's not setting yourself apart, it's trembling with. And just responding out of that. It's like feeling it, not being overwhelmed by it, but really feeling it and just, enfolding. And that lovely sense of transmission until they become bright with my beauty. You know, you can, almost like the Bodhisattva's wish to let something flow, some strength flow through them
rather than dispensing it.
Yes, that's it.
Yes.
That's it, yeah. And that lovely notion of trembling with, yeah. But then the last few lines are even more extraordinary, aren't they?
Their souls with my wisdom luminous awe, till I have become like them, a seed between whetstones of custom and circumstance.
So we were talking a lot about that last night.
Yeah.
So what do you think that means?
Well, I think it means that the Bodhisattva feels so strongly for the suffering that they're witnessing, that they would hug until they couldn't do it anymore. It's almost like that they would exhaust their means. They would want to give them of themselves until there was nothing left. Almost until they had, it's great if the suffering person can benefit from the Bodhisattva's response. Great, but if they can't alleviate the suffering, the Bodhisattva still feels it's worth it. I think that's what the Bodhisattva can't but respond to the suffering, even if it means that they fail.
Or fail to help.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and I was thinking it's something like, see if you think this is right, the Bodhisattvas, to be a Bodhisattva, you're a highly developed being, you're on the brink of enlightenment, but they would even be prepared to give that up to help,
Yes.
They would even go, okay, I'm not going to get enlightened then, I'm going to actually become like these people, it's much more important to me to help than to think of my own gain, even my spiritual gain.
Yeah.
Because even spiritual gain can end up becoming a bit sort of weirdly self-centered, a bit like me and my meditation. There's always that danger that the Bodhisattva would even be prepared to give up enlightenment for the sake of beings. Not that it's a paradox, because actually in the helping beings they then would become enlightened, but they'd be ready to give that up.
It's the attitude, the sort of the standing before other beings, not as superior.
Yeah.
But as just how can I help?
How can I help? Yeah. So our last poem is going to sort of hopefully illustrate what we've been talking about all evening to the nth degree, because what we've talked about in the first half is this: we've got to develop ourselves. In the second half, it can't be just about ourselves. We are relational, so it's got to be relational. And because we are unenlightened, presumably, I certainly am not enlightened, so presumably we experience those as two separate trends. We experience that as the trend of, I've got to develop myself and change myself. but hang on, I mustn't forget other people. I've got to help other people as well. We'll experience that as two separate things, and we'll even experience that as a tension, yeah? We'll experience that, the tension of going inwards versus the tension versus the action of going outwards. Does that make sense to people when I'm describing it? So what are we going to do with this tension? Well, what Bhante says, and this is traditional what he says, is we must not try and solve the tension on its own level. That sort of counterintuitively, actually, we've got to sort of ramp up the tension. We've got to keep working on ourselves, and also we've got to keep trying to help beings. More and more and more of each. He said, whatever you do, don't try and solve it by just choosing one or the other. If you just try and help beings without working on yourself, that's going to be disaster. You'll just end up adding to the problem. If you just decide to withdraw and just work on yourself and not help beings, that's going to be a disaster. It's just spiritual individualism, and it's kind of horrible in a way to witness that. You've got to ramp both of them up, and then what he says is eventually there'll be an explosion and you'll enter a level. How does he put it? It's a level on which, I want to actually read it out because it's better than I can put it. He says, he says there's a conflict. He says you've got to be big enough and rich enough in yourself to embrace the possibilities of that conflict. Not do the easy solution or supposedly easy solution of choosing between them. Don't allow the tension to relax. And then he says, you get to a point where withdrawal and involvement are no longer separate, but not because that you've sort of squeezed them into one, but because, here's the quote, the plane or level on which their duality existed has been transcended, yeah? So you've gone beyond the possibility of them being separate. At the same time, they're not numerically one, as it were. You've gone somewhere where they're just not separate anymore. And that is real Buddhahood, that's Bodhisattvahood. So wisdom and compassion are the same thing. So taken to their highest level, that like self-progression, self-development at its very nth degree is wisdom, and then that going out to others to its nth degree is compassion. But we experience them as separate, but the act in reality, capital R, they're not separate. And then we wanted to finish with a poem that beautifully illustrates this. And what's wonderful about this poem is out of the whole set we've read, it's one of Bhante's very first poems. It's written in 1948. He's only 23. I don't know if any of you are still 23 or younger, but if you are, I hope you can write such a poem, because it's amazing to me and to us that Bhante's written this when he's only 23. And it shows that this understanding of wisdom and compassion being not separate was there right from the beginning. It's not something he came to in old age. It matured in him, but he knew it right from the start. You know, he knew it right from the start, and everything was an expression of that and a working out of that. So Vishvantara is going to read it. We might say a few words about it, and then we'll just end with another meditation.
So in this poem, compassion is translated as mercy. The poem's called Aspiration. The dim sun sinks to rest in a west of watery gold. The young stars climb the sky, and there, like flowers, unfold in the forest vast of night, petals of purest light. So may my heart unfold when the suns of the world have have set. In the forest vast of the void, wisdom with mercy met in that tranquil, silent hour, like a flower and the scent of a flower.
Really beautiful, isn't it? Beautiful to think of this young man of 23 with such an insight and such beauty. It's also got it's very beautiful, isn't it? It's the spiritual life as a beautiful life. Like that lovely image of the stars like flowers climbing the sky and like flowers. And then, so may my heart unfold, for the sons of the world have said. So he means by that when worldly desire isn't there anymore, he must mean that then my heart unfolds. And then wisdom and mercy. So as Vishvantara said, he means compassion. And then like the flower and the scent of the flower. What do you think about that image, Vishvantara?
It's one that Sangharakshita comes back to in other forms throughout his poetry, like the moonlight and the moon. The flower and the scent of the flower, what's to separate them? Wisdom and compassion are like that. Who can say which is which? It's they're inseparable. They arise, they co-arise, they arise together. The conditions that produce them ultimately are the same. Something like that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Good. Okay, so we're going to end with another little meditation, just for about 10 minutes. So what we'll do is I'll read you that poem again, and this time we'll do a little mini metta bhavana, where we'll just spend a few moments contacting our own heart, and then perhaps bring to mind someone who is suffering that we know, and just extend loving kindness to them. You don't need to try and work out what compassion really means or anything like that. You just need to have a heart of love and have in mind that person who's suffering. Yeah, you don't need to do anything. You just need to be with them with a heart of love. Yeah, and then we just allow that to extend to all beings, and then I'll ring a bell, and then Vishvantara will lead us in the Avalokiteshvara mantra, who's the Bodhisattva particularly associated with compassion. Or should we have the Tara mantra? Or Avalokiteshvara? Avalokiteshvara. And then we just join in chanting that, and then when that fades away, that'll be the end of our evening. Okay. Just settle in. Aspiration. The dim sun sinks to rest in a west of watery gold. The young stars climb the sky, and there, like flowers, unfold in the forest vast of night, petals of purest light. So may my heart unfold when the suns of the world have set. In the forest vast of the void, wisdom with mercy met. In that tranquil, silent hour, like a flower and the scent of a flower. Just tuning in with ourselves, our own hearts. Sense of beauty, kindness, gratitude. Now bringing to mind and heart someone we know who's suffering. You don't need to do anything. Don't need to try and solve it. We just need to bring them into that field of metta. inviting all beings into that field of metta that we're all creating.
Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme